Mr. Chairman, and to the Credentials Committee. My name is Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer, and I live at 626 East Lafayette Street, Rooseville, Mississippi, Sunflower County, the home of Senator James O. Eastland and Senator Stinnett. It was the 31st of August in 1962 that 18 of us traveled 26 miles to the county courthouse in Indianola to try to register to become first-class citizens. We was met in Indianola by policemen, highway patrolmen, and they only allowed 2 of us in to take the literacy test at the time. After we had taken this test and started back to Rooseville, we was held up by the city police and the state highway patrolmen and carried back to Indianola, where the bus driver was charged that day with driving a bus the wrong color. After we paid the fine among us, we continued on to Rooseville, and Reverend Jeff Sonny carried me 4 miles in the rural area where I had worked as a timekeeper and sharecropper for 18 years. I was met there by my children that told me the plantation owner was angry because I had gone down, tried to register. After they told me, my husband came and said the plantation owner was raising Cain because I had tried to register. And before he quit talking, the plantation owner came and said, Fannie Lou, do you know, did Pap tell you what I said? And I said, yes, sir. He said, well, I mean that, said if you don't go down and withdraw your registration, you will have to leave. Said then if you go down and withdraw, that you still might have to go because we are not ready for that in Mississippi. And I addressed him and told him, that I didn't try to register for you. I tried to register for myself. I had to leave that same night. All of this is on account of we want to register to become first-class citizens. And if the Freedom Democratic Party is not seated now, I question America. Is this America, the land of the free and the home of the brave, where we have to sleep with our telephones off of the hook because our lives be threatened daily because we want to live as decent human beings in America? Thank you.
Hello and welcome to the SWEA TCTAC EPA Region 2 New York, New Jersey monthly training. My name is Sada Salem. I am from the SWEA TCTAC team, the Director of Community Engagement. We're really excited today to have our presenter, Ms. Kim Gaddy from the South Ward Environmental Alliance, presenting on environmental justice and community organizing. So just some logistics before we dive in. This meeting is being recorded and will be shared with you all after we present in a few days, and will be hosted on our YouTube page. Please keep yourself on mute during the presentation. If you have any questions that you sent prior to today, or you have questions that come up during the presentation, please submit them in the chat box. We will have a Q&A section where we will address all your questions. Also, you're welcome to raise your hand during our Q&A as well to speak and share your questions directly. Before we move on to the presentation, we just wanted to level set what is the SWEA TCTAC, and TCTAC stands for the Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center. It is housed in, there are 16 of these across the nation, and for our region, which is New York, New Jersey, USVI, and Puerto Rico, the SWEA team, along with its alliance and steering committee, are serving New York and New Jersey. We hope that our region, what we aim to serve is to provide equal access and opportunity for folks to take advantage of grants, both federal, state, and local philanthropic money to address environmental issues in our region. We really want to make sure that we're meeting communities where they're at, and part of this series of trainings, virtual trainings, is to help build capacity and technical support for our communities. Additionally, you can learn more about the WEA TCTACs and the TCTACs in general, which are funded by the EPA and DOE at the EPA's website, but also we'll have some QR codes at the end so you can engage with us if you need technical assistance and support. And with that, I will pass it over to Ms. Gaddy to present on community organizing, environmental justice as well.
Thank you, Sada, and good evening, everyone. Thank you to all of our South Ward residents who are in the house, who attend our regularly scheduled monthly meetings. Tonight, we are expanding our base, and as Sada said, we're including members of the TCTAC Region 2. The South Ward Environmental Alliance is an alliance of residents and community-based organizations with a focus on environmental justice issues in the South Ward of the great city of Newark, New Jersey. Our mission is to cultivate healthy and vibrant neighborhoods by ensuring residents' voices are heard and they are active participants in decision-making policies that impact their neighborhood. Our key priorities are air quality, water equity, leadership training. Next slide. Some of you have always seen this, we just want to breathe. And that's one of the reasons I started off with Fannie Lou Hamer, as we are almost concluding Black History Month. She was sick and tired of being sick and tired of a lot of the injustices. And in Newark, with 1 out of 4 children who have asthma, with the South Ward being the backyard of the second largest port, the cumulative impacts of pollution that we suffer from not only our port, our airport, the many highways, the 25,000 diesel trucks that come in and out of that port on a daily basis, and 4,500 staying on our local roads, is impacting the health of our youth and our senior citizens. And so we always say through our air quality monitoring, we just want to breathe. It's our right as humans to breathe clean air. Next slide. Environmental justice, some of you know the EPA definition. I'm not going to read that. That's up there for you. But for me, as a person who have been in the EJ space for many years and decades, environmental justice to me is Kuti Jakalia, which is one of the 7 principles of the Nguzo Saba, which means self-determination. We have a right to ensure our communities are safe and free from harmful pollutants. In addition, we must create healthy, vibrant neighborhoods by speaking for ourselves. And so we always say one of the environmental justice principles is we have to have a seat at the table, meaningful participation in the narrative of what we want our communities to look like. Next slide. South Ward Environmental Alliance is based on the Hermes principles of democratic organizing. The first one is being inclusive. Second, emphasis on bottom-up organizing, bottom-up, not top-down. Let people speak for themselves, work together in solidarity and mutuality. And that's what we're about in our South Ward. We want to make sure that we are partners with the Clinton Hill Community Action Organization, with South Ward Promise Neighborhood, with Parents Educating Parents, with our other stakeholders, our hospitals, our schools. It's important that we come together in solidarity, right? Because we all have to benefit from the environment, the good things of our environment. We must build just relationships among ourselves. And then lastly, commitment to self-transformation. We have a right to transform. Next slide. And these are the 7 principles of environmental justice. I'm not going to read them all, but I just want you to take a minute to look at them. And then in your spare time, please do your research because it is so important. These principles was written now in 1991, when a group of advocates and leaders came together for the first People of Color Summit in Washington, D.C. I was able to attend the second, it was every 10 years, I was able to attend the second People of Color Environmental Summit in 2002. They didn't have one in 2001. And it changed my life. That's what made me begin to really focus on my community, because these principles was something that I believed in, and that I knew that in order for us to be able to live in vibrant, healthy communities and thrive, that we had to lift up these principles. So next slide, you will see the remainder principles of environmental justice. And if you have not seen them before, please pull it up on Google search and begin to practice them. Next slide. So this is what brings us here today, community organizing training. It is so important that as we begin to advocate for our communities, we know how to, right? We don't need people parachuting into our communities. We need to make sure that we are training up our residents so that we can organize the way we want to. And we have to make sure that our voices are heard. We are the change makers that we need in our communities. Next slide. So these are the elements that I will be discussing today: grassroots organizing, petition and letter writing, effective public speaking, canvassing, lobbying, and 3-minute speech. Next slide. Why do we kind of do grassroots organizing? You know, it's because we believe that the power of people can make a change in their communities and on their own behalf, right? We always say the power is vested in the people. We elect individuals and we hold them in trust, but the power is with us. Also, we want to make sure democracy works by engaging ordinary people in a bottom-up campaign strategy, not top-down, bottom-up. And then we want to work to increase the capacity of a social justice movement by creating new volunteers, activists, leaders, organizations, and the next generation of environmental justice advocates. Next slide. This is a quote that I use all the time. Never doubt that a small group of committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And that's from Margaret Mead. I know so many people use it, but this has always inspired me. Next slide. Basic elements of organizing. This is so very important when you begin any campaign in your community, when you want to change anything that you feel is not working. If people don't know that you exist, then you don't. So I can invest all the things that I want in the Southward Environmental Alliance. But if my Southward residents, if the stakeholders in my communities don't know we exist, by being present and them seeing us within the community, then how can they help me move the environmental justice issues that I need, right? So you have to make sure that you advocate, you agitate, and you engage people. Nobody wants to get involved unless the issue resonates. So when I talk about being a mother of 3 asthmatic children, that resonates because so many people, unfortunately, in the city of Newark suffer from asthma or have respiratory illnesses or have relatives who have asthma, right? So you have to turn that personal reason into a cause for action. And that's what I did. I started out 23 years ago because my second child was diagnosed with asthma. And I made sure that I was going to make sure every elected official from local, state, and national level knew that this was a crisis and that when you talk about asthma, more people die in a year from asthmatic attacks than homicides. But what we see on TV, what we hear in the city of Newark, throughout the state, and in most EJ's communities is the homicides. Asthma is the silent killer. And so we must be able to address it. So I make that my personal issue, and then I tie that into everything else. Leadership comes in many forms. It consists of many people. No one person can do it all. You have to be able to delegate and appreciate. There's many talents in our community. No one knows it all. I learn each and every day from individuals, not only within my organization, but from within my community, from our seniors to our youth. And so you have to be able to appreciate that knowledge and embrace it. Fight for what you really want, not what you think you can get. Don't settle. Aim high, because you know what? You just might get it. When we started our fight 12 years ago, fighting for the environmental justice law in the state, we knew that there was going to be certain compromises. But over those 12 years, we said we're going to keep our eye on the prize. And although it took 12 years, New Jersey was able to establish the environment. Well, it took us 12 years to finally get our governor, and the elected officials had the political will. But it was something that is going to now help all of us in our community, right? And if we would have just kept saying, oh, it's not going to happen, 2 years, let's just give up, we wouldn't have the strongest environmental justice law in the nation, right? And it was because a group of 6 people started the conversation. And now it's something that can help the thousands of individuals who live in the state of New Jersey. And now there's other states that want to copy what that law is doing in our state and other states. And then, of course, you must celebrate all your victories, large or small, right? That keeps the morale and the support. And don't just be so depressed over things. Have fun, right? This work is enjoyable. And although we sometimes see individuals who are passing from illnesses, we can still rejoice on those memories, right? And how they was impactful in somebody's life. So celebrate those victories and make sure the work that you're doing, you find some fun in it. Add your creative energies and juices to any campaign that you have so that you can keep the momentum going. Next slide. Next slide. So designing a campaign. This is also important as well. You want to pick your issue and know why you're picking this issue. You want to set short and long-term goals, issue and base building, right? Because you want to be able to build that base of support. You want to know who your friends and your foes are, right? So you want to know who's with you and who's against you. And you want to identify your different targets. A person with a potential to give you what you want or influence decision makers. So I live in the South, our organization's in the South Ward of the City of Newark. My South Ward councilman, right, is responsible. He was elected to serve this ward. So I have to make sure that he is supportive of what I'm doing because he's an influencer. So now he will then go to the mayor. He will then go to his council colleagues, right? And to push our issues. So you have to be able to have a conversation with those individuals. If it's an issue with the public school system, you go to a school board member, right? Then you go to the superintendent. You go to a principal if it's at a local school. So these are the things that you must do as you design your campaign. Know who your target is, who's on your side, and who's not on your side. Then you develop your timeline and your tactics. So that's all the activities that you're going to do. The community meeting, canvassing in the community, right? Those are the things, attending certain meetings. Those are those activities. And then you must find your computers, your talent, your money, and the people power. You don't need a lot of money, but sometimes you might need some financial support to print some flyers if you don't have a copier. But you could also ask individuals to donate. Right? So you say you have a copier, can you donate 100 flyers, right? But make sure that most of your time, and as you are designing your campaign, is built around the people. Next slide. Message and materials. This is very important. Your message has to be clear, concise, in order for your campaign to stick, right? It can't be all mumbled and jumbled and long where people's like, well, what are they talking about? So you want to create materials for multiple purposes, right? You want to have a slogan that can fit on a bumper sticker or that can fit on, your different kind of materials. You want to be able in 30 seconds to be able to explain your campaign, right? So we know that people, attention span is short. So you practice for 2 minutes, but if you know somebody's getting agitated, you have to be able to say what you need to say in 30 seconds. Create your fact sheets, not a 5-page fact sheet, a 1-page fact sheet. And then you also want to develop a petition or letter writing to officials or the media. So if there are some specific objectives that you want to cover, then you could put that in a petition form. Next slide. Petition writing. So the objectives of petitions is to articulate your concerns or your call to action. So you want to be able to circulate your petition at a community meeting, a block association meeting, if you're canvassing the neighborhood, right? Or if you're just having a coffee clutch at someone's house. Then you want to use the petition to generate and demonstrate your support base that is supportive of the concerns that you might have to present to that South Ward councilman, your mayor, or whoever that decision maker is. That's why the petition is so important. Next slide. This is what a petition looks like. So you would have your organizational logo. What I'm seeking support of the Southward Environmental Alliance to ensure our Newark neighborhoods are protected from the cumulative impacts of multiple pollution threats, including dirty diesel. So then my support statement, zero emissions now. Together, we call on New Jersey governor to prioritize funds, right? Mandate policies in the use of electric trucks and goods movement in Newark Port region. Second statement, we call on the mayor of Newark to establish a kids' clean air zones where only electric buses and trucks are allowed. So within these statements, we are articulating not only what we want to happen locally, but then also what we want to happen statewide, right? And then, so that's our call to action. And then you have our signatures. So you cannot be an organizer if you can't have information to contact people. So being able to have signatures and the information from people is key. If you don't remember anything else on here, people have to write legibly, right? And you need their name, their email, their phone, right? And where they live. If they're not going to put their address, at least get an email and a phone number so you can communicate with them, right? And then the last piece of the petition is your information. So that if somebody said, well, how can I reach you? You don't have to think about it. You have your website and you have your organizational information right there on the petition, right? And that's why this is so important. It's a snapshot of your whole campaign, and it's broken down in 5 areas. And this is powerful. Next slide. You can also activate through letter writing, that's a key tool to involve the public in your campaign. There are senior citizens and youth who like to, write. Kindergarten and first grade students, they could draw pictures, right? One thing about an elected official, they will respond to a written letter. That is also powerful. So you want to make sure that your letter reflects the public support to the decision maker that you are approaching. Handwritten letters are personal. If an elected official gets a handwritten letter, they're gonna say, oh, a person took the time to write me, right? As opposed to a type, because that could be generated or a computer, right? So you wanna make sure that you just write a simple handwritten letter. And in it, just be your authentic self. Be honest, right? Be compelling, and explain why you're writing this letter to this individual, right? And if an elected official receives 10 letters, 10 letters can amount to, because 10 individuals know 10 people, right? Those 10 people know 10 people. So the power of 10 letters is like 100 people to an elected official, because they know that if you took the time to write that, you also was having conversation with individuals. So that's why they take notice. And so that's really, this is a powerful tool. I know a lot of people have gotten away from it, but it is something that is also powerful. Next slide. You can also, this is important to keep track of your success. As you get individuals who say, I sent a letter to the councilman, or I sent a letter to the mayor, make sure you're writing that down, right? And you're counting it. Because if you go to speak, or if you run into the councilman or the mayor, you can talk about, oh, did you get the 100 letters that supporters of the Southward Environmental Alliance sent in regarding truck traffic down on Clinton Avenue? You can actually say that, right? And then you also want to make sure that you measure and have a conversation about the experience and the interaction while it's fresh in your mind, right? Because that's important. You can learn from what happened or what didn't happen. So you want to make sure that you measure that success when the campaign is over, honestly. You have a conversation with your team, some of the community members that might have participated, because it's okay. Everything is not going to go well or perfect the first time, but you have to be honest and be able to assess it so that the next time you get better, right? Next slide. Effective public speaking. Now, this is important because, again, not only are you reaching out to your community with maybe door-to-door canvassing, petition writing, now you might want to go to that council meeting or that board of education meeting or zoning board meeting. So you want to make sure that you are using the appropriate language, your delivery is clear, you have eye contact, you're not like looking down or looking over here, you are looking direct at the individual that you're talking to. Because when you have that eye contact, they know that you're serious, you're informed, and you want them to respond to you. But if you're looking all over and you're unsure, then they know that you're not serious about what it is that you're doing. It's important that all of your ideas are organized in a logical manner so that you're talking in a succession that they can follow. You're talking about this week, and you're not jumping to 2 years ago, back to yesterday. You want to do it in order. You want to make sure it's interesting, personal. You have some statistics, and then you have some real life examples. Yes, I was walking on Freeland-Heisen Avenue when I saw a senior citizen slip and almost got hit by a car or a truck. Like, that's a personal experience. You saw it. You could speak about it with that passion, right? You're able to get that point across, and then you persuade the listeners. Effective use of any of your handouts, your literature, PowerPoints, other visual aids, that's important when you are speaking, because it lets them know that you also prepared for this presentation, and it's okay, because what if you get nervous? Now you have your notes in front of you, right? To make sure that you're staying on point and you're addressing those issues and concerns that you want to make sure they hear. And then you practice. You can practice your speech with your family members, with your community supporters before talking, right? So we have many people who come before a municipal council meeting. It might be their first time, right? And so you say, look, what are your talking points? You want to run it by me? I'll listen. And then you can give them feedback. And it's just a way to support and encourage them to continue to fight for what they know they need to fight for in their respective communities. Next slide. Why canvass your neighborhood? You know, all of this is leading up to, in order for people to engage in any activities, you have to touch them 3 or 4 times, right? So all of these tactics and strategies, it's about communicating and touching and making sure people hear from you 3 or 4 times, not 1 time, because they'll forget. But if you're touching that individual 3 or 4 times, they're going to remember, oh yeah, yes, I heard of them. Oh, I got the letter. Oh, I saw you at a meeting. Oh, thank you for coming to the church or whatever. So grassroots education and public outreach, that's one of the major tools when you're canvassing like your neighborhood. It's very important to learn about what the local concerns are, right? Because now when you're out talking about what it is you want to do, you could respond and reciprocate on what an issue is of the community member, right? So it's important that you understand what is actually happening in your community, right? Canvassing generates a lot of public support, signatures, phone calls, and they will come out to a community meeting because they said, you know what? Asada Rashidi knocked on my door and she informed me of X, Y, and Z. They almost feel compelled to now come out, that somebody really took the time and the interest. This is what old school, we used to do this like all the time. And we got away from that door to door talking to our neighbor, right? So we got to get back to that because now the community feel like they have some support. It's not this one isolated resident who feels like she has no support on her block. Now, when you're coming around, you say, oh yeah, and I talked to Mr. Young on Hansberry. Oh, I talked to Mr. Tucker on Kier. Like you are, and they know these individuals. They say, oh, even if they don't know, they say, oh, he talked to that one and that one. It encourages them to mobilize more residents and support what it is that you're doing. And then it also is a way for you to identify new members and volunteers who might want to support your cause or your actions, right? Personal contact is so valued and it's memorable. People will remember. I never forgot when Savannah, one of our members of the South Ward, when she was just a new homeowner and we was having a meeting and my son knocked on her door to come attend a Clinton Hill Community Action event. And she just talked about it to me like, like a week ago. But she remembered that personal touch because she had just moved in the neighborhood and somebody's knocking on her door about something that's happening in her community and an organization that's right there trying to help change what's happening. She never forgot that. And now actually she's a board member of the Clinton Hill Community Action. So that's a true story. It's something that resonated because it was that personal touch. And she felt connected to the issue and that somebody came to my house to inform me. Next slide. Basic skills of canvassing. And this is something that I talked about a little bit. It is so important for you to have direct eye contact. When you come in, hi, I'm Kim Gaddy. I'm with Southward Environmental Alliance. Like I'm looking directly at you. I'm not, looking all over the place. And then when I come to you, I already have my clipboard. I'm not fumbling my clipboard. I'm Kim Gaddy with the Southward Environmental Alliance, and I'm here to talk to you about truck traffic in your community. And when you have a clipboard and you're putting it into somebody's face, they feel compelled to what? Grab it, right? So as you do that, and you're looking dead at them, they're going to actually grab your clipboard. And then we use the term KISS, keep it short and simple. Again, 30 seconds, no more than 1 minute. People are cooking, dinner, they're preparing and helping their children with homework. But they will be courteous, but you have to keep it short and simple. And then you have to have a specific ask. In order to get the results that you want, you don't want to have 10 different issues. One specific ask, right? That they can relate to and say, okay, I can support this. And it's okay to make sure they understand the sense of urgency that they need to act now. That's important, because otherwise they'll take the, oh, can I get back to you? And they'll never get back to you. While you have their attention, you want to make sure you stress that sense of urgency for them to act and be engaged right now. Next slide. This is a simple example of a wrap. You know, when we go to the door and we're canvassing, it's always about who, what, and what the specific ask is. Hi, my name is Kim Gaddy. I'm with the Southward Environmental Alliance. We're working on environmental justice and air pollution issues. We are generating community support for our current efforts. Take a look. Can I have your support? So remember, I got the eye contact. I'm quick, kiss, keep it short and simple. I'm talking about what the current issue is and what's my specific ask, right? Next slide. And within that is the body of the wrap. It talks about what the problem is, right? And then it talks about what the solution is. So we talked about the different problems that we have in our city around air pollution. And then what we want as a solution is kids' clean air zones, right? We want to make sure that our playgrounds, our athletic fields, and the places where our children and families recreate is free from emission and toxic air. So you have, that's the body of the wrap. You have the problem, 1 in 4 children in Newark have asthma, and then you have a solution. Next slide. And the conclusion is the ask. You want to ask them. You already have the clipboard. You gave your wrap. They know why you're here. Can you sign this petition to support our efforts? And after you went through all those things, they're going to say yes, right? And so then you thank them. And you, if that person is really enthusiastic and feel like, oh, this is great. And then you ask that person, they want to sign up and, you know, be a volunteer, or would they want to engage a little bit more in your organization and your activities. So that is something that's really important. Next slide. So this is lobbying for change. So I'm going to go through this a little quick because my time is, you know, it's also important. Some organizations are a 501c3 and not C4, but in any nonprofit organization, you can lobby for a specific amount of time. Because guess what? Talking to your elected official at City Hall is actually lobbying. You know, you don't have to go all the way down to the State House or go down to Washington, D.C. That is considered lobbying. And so the only thing that I want to say about these next slides is that it's important because when you are engaged in that lobbying activity, because lobbying is also education, right? You're educating people so they can change the situations that they're in, and you're talking directly to a person who can make that change happen. So you want to make sure that you can influence the policies and practices of government or the private entities, and then you can attend public hearings or ask for one-on-one meetings. So when we attend our zoning boards, our planning boards, right? When we attend the council meetings, Newark Housing Authority meetings, these are all different avenues where you're trying to lobby for change. Because if you don't like what is happening, then you have to lobby to change it. Next slide. Now, this is just some tips, and we'll make sure that all these slides will definitely be presented, because I know that was in the chat. I'm reading it now. These slides will definitely be available and sent out to all the participants. Next slide. I want to leave some time for questions, so that's why. These are some more lobbying tips. Next slide. This is, real important. We talked about what we need to say and how quickly we need to say certain things so that we can be as prepared as possible, but also make sure people understand what it is that we want to do. So this is definitely connected to like the canvassing wrap, because you have an introduction, you have a problem, you have a solution, and you have a closing, right? So all of the things that I talked about, whether you're writing, whether you're going door-to-door canvassing, whether you're participating at a meeting, right? Whether you're getting folks to sign a petition or whether you are speaking, all the elements are similar. And you can use the same wrap and just transfer it to whatever activity you want to do, okay? Next slide. And then these are some tips about writing a 3-minute speech, right? So this is really important. It gives you specific points that you should kind of focus on, some examples you want to provide, and then you always want to recap to make sure people understand or heard you clearly. Next slide. Now, this is really important, and I might not be able to get through all of it because I think I got to finish at 6:45, but this is key elements to good communication. Whenever you want to organize in your community, you have to make sure that you have at least these key elements. And the first one is always honesty is the best policy. You don't need to say things that you're not sure of or try to give too much information, right? Because if you say something, say, you know what? I don't know what that answer is, but I'll get back to you. Action-oriented with clear timelines. The next slides are going to break these down specifically too, but I just wanted to elaborate on that honesty one. Action-oriented with clear timelines, consistent message, make materials and oh God, the format inviting. Don't have a flyer that's just full of words, make it formatted so it's inviting to people, easy to access and use, and then use trusted messages. Next slide. So under these elements of good communication, the honesty is the best policy. Truthful, transparent, timely disclosure is very important. People want to trust you, and you have to be transparent, right? And if you don't know, like I said, say so, right? If you don't think something is safe, don't say it's safe. Right? Because then you will get people who will say, what? Well, Kim Gaddy said that to me the other day. That wasn't even true. So now you have an issue of trust. So if you don't really know that it's truthful, don't say it, right? Next slide. Action-oriented communication. This is really important. And it always go back to all those other steps of organizing that I talked about. You want to make sure you understand what the problem is and then what your solution is, right? And then what are you going to do and by when? Timelines, right? And then how can you get the community to be a part of the solution? You want to embrace those individuals because they're your supporters, right? So all of these things connect to the first 10 slides that I showed. Next slide. Consistent messaging. Use catchy slogans, make sure your information and instructions have some uniformity, right? And make sure we use the term easily digestible, right? If you're talking about environmental justice and issues that people don't normally use the terminology, then use something that they can understand and that they can relate to. Don't start talking about those technical terms and they don't know, or start using abbreviations that folks don't know, right? You want to make sure that you're communicating in a way where you are reaching people where they are. So then they can feel comfortable coming into this space and talking about the issues that you want them to support. Next slide. This is important, making your materials and your format inviting. You know, some of you have had flyers that was, you know, you thought they was absolutely wonderful, but it was too much information. A person is going to look, and if they can read something in 10 seconds, that's going to catch them. But if now they got to look through a flyer that has 3 paragraphs of information and 1 picture, no. Make sure you got pictures and graphics all around it. Again, easy to understand, relatable, right? Don't have a whole lot of different you know, styles that can kind of confuse individuals, right? You want to make sure that the location, the time, they know exactly where that is. They can see it, they're not confused, right? And then again, make sure that if things need to be translated, that you do that as well. Next slide. Easy to access and use. You are not communicating if the method you are using is not understandable by people and they can't digest it. You're just talking. Folks have no clue of what it is that you're saying because they can't relate to it, right? So, you know, now we have more and more individuals who are using their telephone, their smartphones to communicate. So now we can text more to our senior citizens. They're more savvy than some of us, right? On the phones. They know how to use the phone. So they might not have a computer, but you know, they got an iPad and they got a cell phone and they know how to use it, right? So now let's make some adjustments on how we can communicate. You know, back in the day, we had the telephone tree. We would call 10 people, you call 10 people, right? We don't use that as much, but we can text 10 people, you can text 10 people, right? You want to also just make sure that when you're using social media, in your handouts, your website is clear. You know, also, oftentimes some people still can have the TV cable alerts where they have some free channels where the community can send a flyer in and they can have some announcements. But again, not everybody has cable or access to it. So you have to really think about that. So let's make sure that you are using communications that can be sustained and then also adjusted over time as needed, right? Next slide. Trusted messages. This is key. You know, our public get very suspicious of individuals who are not truthful and who have some agendas that is not for the people, right? So in order to become a trusted messenger, you have to make sure people can trust what you say and that you can back that up by your actions and not just your word. Oftentimes, they don't want to trust a council person, a school board member, a city official. So now you, as a leader in a community-based organization, as a church, right, leader, as just a block association leader, a district leader, right? They trust you because they see you in the community doing things. So now it becomes your responsibility. So if we say, hey, we got this issue, this zoning is coming up, they want to build this new high rise in our community and there's no parking. They'll trust some individuals from community-based organizations, maybe before they trust those elected officials if they've been burnt by them, right? If your children go to childcare and they see those teachers each and every day, those are some of the best people to be able to pass information to folks because they're already taking care of their children, right? They trust them, right? That neighbor, you know, like they used to tell my mother, my mother would look out the window, she knew everything that was happening. Something happened, she would call you, what you doing? Right? We might not have those neighbors in the window, but we have that one or two that walk the block. Use that individual because they know folks. And so adjust your materials to engage those who have not been engaged, right? And make sure that you're not leaving anybody behind. Next slide. I think, Oh, that was perfect. So I want to thank you. I'm Kim Gaddy. I am the Executive Director of the Southward Environmental Alliance, and now I'll take some questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Gaddy, for that powerful presentation. And as you said, now we will open up the floor for some questions. I want to address the question that was put in the chat by Mr. Jim Grant. Kim, what is your advice for working with or getting help or responses from New Jersey state and agencies?
So my advice was to make sure that you have residents that are in their district. So if you have a state assemblyman or a state senator, you want to make sure that you're using people in their district that actually vote for them. And you take them to the meeting and you let them know, hey, this is the issue that we're having in our district. And I have 10 of your constituents, right? Because these elected officials are concerned about votes, right? Who's voting for them. So I'm going to make sure that whoever you are addressing, you take the people that elected them into office and you make sure they know it. So when they speaking, yeah, I live at 1058 Hunterdon Street and you're my assemblywoman, right? Or you're my elected official. So you make sure that you show the power in the support. Or if you know there's certain organizations that they support, you bring members of those organizations with you to the meeting because that's power, because they trust those leaders within those organizations. So that's how you can, those are some suggestions I would make to you.
Thank you. If we have other questions, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat or raise your hand and we'll call on you.
Oh, was that good? No questions? Okay, what's happening? Let me see. Thank you. All right.
Okay, we have another question in the chat. Kim, from Miss Janice Relaford. Kim, is there a difference between advocates and leadership?
So an advocate, you know, to me, an advocate is a leader, right? When you're advocating for your issues, right, that's important to you, you become a leader and a trusted messenger in that space, right? Because they look at you to discuss housing injustices, right? Housing issues that no one else was addressing. So as you are advocating for what the community needs, now you become that trusted messenger and leader, right? And whether you like it or not, you become a part of the leadership of that issue, right? Because now you have perfected your knowledge, your ability to articulate what's happening through advocacy, right? And now you are turning that into leadership and training up the next generation of leaders who will now advocate on these same issues. So they are tied together, and it's important that you do both, that you're able to advocate, but then also be that leader, right? Because individuals need that leadership in order to understand what they're advocating for, right? And so, you know, great question. But yes, I believe that there's real no difference to me.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have a question from Tina Johnson. What about online organizing? Is it strictly for collecting information and signatures?
No, it can be more powerful than that. I mean, I know I had a conversation with the Gen Z, Gen X, those individuals that said, listen, I'm not going to come out to a rally. I know you believe in protest and marching down the street, but what could I do online? This is what, you know, I went to visit some college students and they were serious about it. I said, okay, well, what can you do? They said, well, we'll organize an online petition and we'll make sure we'll follow up with the elected officials, but I'm not going to go and march down the street. I said, okay, Let's come up with a plan, right? So you can use those strategies for online organizing to build your base of supporters, to get volunteers who want to be in that digital space. You could also use those individuals to create some apps, individuals who like that digital space. You organize in a way that now all of your information is actually more organized because it's all digital. They put it in a database. They know how to send that information out. So it's powerful, and it definitely can be used more than just for an issue. It's a way to mobilize and increase your membership, as well as a way, some of these young students, they actually use it as fundraising as well. So they're taking it to that next level. And you can see when Obama actually was elected, he was one of the first that, went out there with that whole concentration of let's mobilize some of the young folks, and we're just going to ask them for $5. And they was able to build a serious support base from that. So you could use it in multiple ways.
Okay. Next, we have a question from Ronald Zaria. Sorry if I butchered your name. Any tools you recommend for keeping track of notes, names, stories, etc.?
So I know that and I guess Asada and the younger folks on my staff, they're better versed in this than me. But I think that when you pay for a lot of the computer technologies that's on there, so for example, Teams, right? Within Teams, they have different apps that you can use to communicate with individuals. It's almost like they're separate chats, you're right. And so I know that we use Teams a lot. Individuals are using Slack to kind of communicate and keep material centralized. I'm still at old school. I'm still emailing my staff, and they're like, we put it in the folder. It's in this document. And I'm like, what? Where is it? I can't find it. So I'm kind of still a dinosaur, and they are pulling me screaming and hollering, right, Asada? I know that my staff is laughing, but there are a lot of technologies that can be used that you're already paying for, so you don't have to pay extra. I know a lot of individuals who are in Microsoft, they've gotten away from Zoom because, like I said, they're using the Teams, right? There's a lot of young folks who are now using Google Meets. That is also an easy way. I had a whole conversation with senior citizens who I was able to just send them the link, and it was Google Meets, and they loved it. And they could still see me. They could still have a conversation with us. So again, it's all about meeting people where they are and seeing what people are comfortable with first before you decide on what you want to kind of pursue. Because there are still some individuals who are not as comfortable with using a lot of those technologies and ways to keep them organized. And so I know that I can get a better response from my staff. So make sure, Asada, you keep that question, and I will have them respond better than I did.
You did great, Miss Gaddy. Okay, I see
I
that
gotta
there
be
are,
honest, right, Asada? I gotta be honest.
yes, there are two more questions in the chat. So from Kelly Wilson, how do you deal with messaging on social media, assuring that you are being authentic or getting the proper messaging out to the appropriate groups or individuals?
Now that's tricky. Because social media can be a way that can be helpful or can be harmful, because individuals can misinterpret or try to come in that space and put some negative spin onto what it is that you're trying to do. So if it's a group of individuals that are in an organization, I would always make I would kind of make it private so that you can give information out, but the feedback doesn't go to the whole, like the whole list, right? Because then what happens is now individuals might put something in it that is not truthful. And so then the whole group starts a conversation on something that you shouldn't even be talking about. It's almost like when we started having these Zoom meetings when COVID hit, and individuals would Zoom bomb. I think that was the right name. Like we would be having a meeting, and it was for a community, and it was a way that we was able to organize because we couldn't go, out in public. We would get people who somehow received our link and now would come into our meeting, and some of it was very bad. They would say some terrible things, or they would put videos, videos would start flashing across the presentation. So you have to just be very careful. I do think that it is a great way to communicate, but you have to be careful on how you're sending it out. And so I know some folks don't like webinars when you have a larger group, but to me, you can control it a little bit more, because if you're not sure who your audience is and you don't want certain interruptions, then you could do that webinar style where they can have question and answers in the chat that you can address, or you can actually allow them to then come in too once you've vetted them. And so that's why now what we do with some of our organizational meetings is we have individuals register. And I know some members is like, why we got to do all of this? But it's just another level of accountability and protection so that you can actually see if this is a person that want to come in and be disruptive, because the work that we're doing is for the betterment of the community, but not everybody wants to do things for the betterment of the community. So they want to come in and distract and cause confusion. So that's, I would just be mindful of when you are trying to utilize these spaces, that you're careful in how you're allowing people to communicate back to you. Yeah, not open to the public, someone says. Yes, not open to the public.
So we are coming up on time. It is 7 o'clock. There was one more question in the chat. Not sure if you wanted to address that one really quickly, Miss Gaddy. The question is from Dina Corbin, and she asked, can you point out some strategies for harmonious collaboration and keeping people on the same page with no hidden agendas?
Yes, I mean, I think this is really important. This is why I say honesty is the best policy. It is really important for us to be our authentic selves and bring our authentic selves and beliefs into the rooms, right? This work that each of us are doing is very time consuming, and we take it, with all of our heart and with our passions. And so when we communicate with people, we want to make sure that we're not talking over people, that we are allowing space for, like, when we start off our meetings, we start off with what we call a circle, a healing circle, so that we can say, just, how are you doing? Like, oftentimes when we're doing this work, we don't get a chance to talk about how people are doing outside of this work. So we want to make sure that we open up the space and talk, say, listen, I don't want you to talk about work, but for 30 seconds, how are you feeling today? Because sometimes people don't ever get the opportunity to talk about how they feel. So we want to create, in the first 5 and 10 minutes of our meetings, that space of healing, right? Where, I'm having a bad day today. This is happening. You want to let somebody be able to express that, right? So then now that allows us to now relate to people in a more human way. Right. And so as we are trying to organize people and keep them together, it's also important that we are not disrespectful of people's religions, right? Of people, how they enter the space, how they want to be referred to. We got to always, language justice is very important, right? Individuals have to understand how we can use language also for justice, right? And then we have to believe in reciprocity. everything is not about my organization or your organization. If we want to bring about real transformational changes, we have to make sure that we all come into this space supporting each other. How can I help you? Yes, how can you help me? How can we help our community to grow? And I think if people enter with that and not their own selfish, agendas, now you can have a more meaningful conversation and be able to now move the subject matter and the issues along with honesty, with transparency, with love. We have to make sure that as we are organizing this community, we don't forget that we're humans, right? And so I think that these are some ways, and so we use the Maya principles, we're using the Guzu Saba principles, right? Because we want to come into any room with that understanding that love, justice comes first, and that we're making sure we're reaching people where they are and understanding that we have a right as Black and brown people to be disappointed, but we can agree to disagree. We don't have to be disrespectful to one another's. And so that's why if you look up those principles of Maya principles of Maya, Nguzu Saba, and where we come from is we say solidarity, support, and solutions, always enter those spaces with understanding that we're coming here in solidarity. We're going to stand with you in support, right? And then we want to have solutions. And if you do that, then you will be successful in engaging people and making sure that you're productive. And I'm sorry if we're over time.
Yes. Thank you so much, Miss Gaddy. I did see one final question in the chat.
Okay.
From Munira Bomani. Will this group
Mhm.
expand throughout all 5 wards?
Yes. Well, we want to make sure that we can have organizations within the respective neighborhoods, because from an environmental justice perspective, I don't live in the East Ward, I don't live in the North Ward, West Ward. We want to, or Central Ward. We want to make sure that we can partner with individuals who already are in those communities and then share what we're doing over here. So now you can have a Central Ward Environmental Alliance, a North Ward, right? Because again, we want to make sure the people who are experiencing the problems in their respective communities have the power to bring about that change. So that Central Ward councilman ain't gonna listen to maybe Kim Gaddy from over here in the South Ward, but he will listen from his residents in the Central Ward and from you, Monora, in the East Ward, right? Or whatever ward you're living in. So I think that that is what's most important, that we can come together and create an organization for every ward, because there are no barriers in the sky. We have one environment, and we have to be the best stewards for Mother Earth that we can be. And we only can do it if we all collectively come together and to begin to address the environmental injustices that we experience just because of the zip codes we live in. Any more?
I
Okay.
see Paul has his hand up. I know there was a poll though, and I want to make sure we're in our
Paul?
operating within our bounds. Jordana and Sada.
It's totally up to you. If you want to
Come
take
on,
the
Paul.
question, go for it.
Come on, Paul. I'm coming. My day's ready to close me up. Come on, Paul.
Okay, all right, thank you. What has been your experience kind of working with, I guess, academics coming into certain spaces to kind of like bridge gaps between communities, agencies to kind of get things going in terms of environmental resiliency, environmental justice, to also enact climate action as well, and sort of like community planning? What's been your what are some things that's worked for you, and what are some lessons you've learned from those kind of experiences?
So when we first started off, it was not good. The academic partners want to come in and write grants, and then they want to take 60% of the funding, you know, for their overhead, and then they want to give you $2. So we had to kind of say, listen, we're the local experts. If you pay your staff member $100 an hour and they're the expert, then my community member should get $100, right? You know, we have to be respected. If we're going to be a partner, we have to have a real seat at the table, and that the local experts are experts in our community have to feel that they are valued at the table with with the colleges. So we began to work with them and say, listen, you have to decrease that overhead expense, or we can't be a part of that. We've been successful with Dr. Jacoby Wilson out of University of Maryland. We've worked with Dr. Rob Lombard at Rutgers EOSHI to help us, because they have the scientists, and we have like purple air monitors, so we have hyperlocal air monitors, and we need the expertise and skill sets of those individuals at the colleges. And at the same time, they also know, though, that the data must be the community's data, because in the past, you would participate with the universities, and they would take and say, this data is mine. And we're like, we need to share it with the community. We need to report out to the community what's happening. And they would hold that data like it was theirs. And so it didn't do any good for us as a community-based group, because now we're sitting here like, well, we can't even report out to the community because they're holding our data hostage. So we had to make sure that before you enter into any relationship, you have an MOU agreement, and you make sure these are the things that we want to control from a community's perspective. You know, data is the science that we use for environmental justice. Even though we know that in our communities we're being harmed and we're dying, but people say, what does the data say? What does the data say, right? So we know that we have to use science as that data, right? And so, but at the same time, if you don't come into those partnerships with a MOU agreement that really dictates and says what it is that we have control of, what it is you have control of, and how this is information that is going to be owned by the community, right? And a community participatory role, then those relationships won't work, especially when some of the community-based organizations don't have access to grant writers like the colleges. So, you know, or because they're educational institution, they can apply for grants like around the clock from workforce development, from any, you know, where a nonprofit, you don't have that ability. So now they're able to move at a faster pace. And we're saying, hold up, we have to move at the speed of trust. Let's first cultivate the relationship with you so that you understand what it is that we do before you begin to move at such a pace that now the community is left behind, right? And so in those cases where you can start off with them understanding exactly what it is that you want, making sure they sign that MOU agreement, making sure when you're going after a grant that you're willing to make sure the most of the funding, the majority of the funding goes to the community first, and it's not something to help supplement the staff at your institutions, right? And when you actually now submit the information to be published, that you make sure you add those community partners as the individuals, right, who helped you write it. Because I have been, you know, when I first started, they would use our information, and I was never listed in any of the final findings. But I learned from other scientists and other people, what, you're not, did you do that? And they use it, and you're not added in here if you don't know, or if you don't ask, right? And so now, because we know, we got to hold them accountable. So I think those are just some, and if you could put your email in the chat, I could kind of talk about some more, because over the 24 years that I've been in this space, there have been some doozies that I could have some conversation with you on, the lack of respect that oftentimes prevent environmental justice groups or community-based groups from partnering with these institutions because of the biases and the nature of some of the racist practices that they come from, right? This is the history of some of those institutions. And so automatically they start off like they're superior, you know, because of maybe their credentials. When our community groups have a doctorate in community organizing, and they should be respected for that. So I would like to definitely have some, you know, further conversation with you.
Thank you. Yeah, I just put my email in the chat. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Okay, I did see one last question. It was about the air monitoring, Miss Gaddy. I want to thank everybody for staying on past the time. And Miss Gaddy, if you want to answer the question, it is from Kevin. How are you using your air monitoring project for advocacy?
Okay, you want to answer that, Asada, as my air monitoring person?
Oh. Okay. So Ms. Gaddy touched on this a little bit with the previous question, but you know, it's important for our community to have our own data so that we can know we can amplify the stories that we already and experiences that we are already having. And so we want to make sure that we're using that to advocate for more solutions that include that help us get to the reduction in emissions. And we use purple air monitors, we do truck counts, we use mobile monitors such as AirBeam. We're looking to include some more monitors into our network, such as the Black Carbon Monitor, such as the Flow mobile monitor or Atmotube mobile monitor. And it's really important that we are collecting all this data so that we can amplify our stories, as I just mentioned, and making sure that we're on the path to more healthy and vibrant communities.
Yes, and one of the things that how we're making sure that we use it too, and I want to acknowledge this week Asada's in DC. She's a member of the NIAC, the National Environmental Youth Advisory Councils, right from Newark. And one of the ways that we use it is by telling her story, right? And training up the next generation of environmental justice leaders, right? Letting them see that they are a major part of what our future should be, right? And that the only way we can change their situation is if they get involved, right? And so we use that as a way of engaging our youth through our Green Alliance Leadership Academy, where we teach them about environmental justice. We teach them why that's important. We get them to begin to see their communities through the lens of environmental, social, and economic justice. So it's not just so normalized that when I walk outside and I see glass or litter or debris everywhere, that this is, or abandoned buildings, that this is how I should live in a community. No, we have them go out and do some asset mapping, right? Just where they are. And then they come back and they begin to see certain things that they don't see in other more affluent neighborhoods, because then I'll take them on a ride up to the more affluent communities and they could see more trees, more green space, no Superfund sites, no vacant lots, no, right? And so I use that as a way for them to begin their advocacy. So now, as a student, I say, listen, what's happening in your school? What is the air quality? how are the water fountains, right? And so I actually meet those students and individuals where they are, and I could connect anything that they do back to the environment. We have one of our partners online, Parents Educating Parents, a statewide parents group that now got involved in this environmental movement because parents was concerned about the health of their children while they're in school, while they're playing their sports, right? And so as you begin to have conversations with different stakeholders in the community, and you can connect what is important to them to our issue, that's how you create better advocates and you keep the movement alive. And so those are some of the strategies that we use that are helpful to us. So if we have gardeners on this call, let's talk about the soil, the lead in the soil. What can you do? You have a garden, but do you know if that soil is healthy? What are you planting, right? And so then as I'm talking about that, then I could begin to talk about, is there any flooding in this community? What about the air quality, right? I could now kind of switch gears and start off where they are, but then now connect it to where I want them to be. So now I can expand their understanding of the environmental injustices that we have with food deserts, bad soil, the need to have safe, affordable, quality drinking water, the reduction of truck and diesel fumes in our community, and then why we need air monitors so that we could then hold our elected officials and Port Authority of New York and New Jersey and all these other people accountable to the issues that's happening. So that's how I use, our advocacy as a way to mobilize, but then also expand the knowledge base of individuals so they can understand that your environment is inclusive of everything, and everything is tied to our environment. So that's how we organize here.
All right. And with that, that is our final question. If you have any further questions, reach out via email or phone call, and we will get back to you. Thank you, Ms. Gaddy, for such a powerful and inspiring presentation. I hope you all took something away and can use this sometime soon in your life. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.